Bucknutters, welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Friday, May 19th, 2017. I am Dave Biddle, and I'm very happy to be joined by Brandon Castel. BCast, there's a lot of talk out there about conference expansion again. Instead of a Power 5, we might have a Power 4 eventually. There's talk that the Big Ten, of course, could expand from 14 to 16 teams, and there's talk that Oklahoma and Texas could be those two teams. I think we're a long way off from anything becoming official or even those schools leaving the Big 12 if they do, but let's just give our opinions on this. Do you want to see the Big Ten expand, or do you like the Big Ten at 14?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I've been one of those guys who initially was resistant. I liked kind of the traditional college football packaging and the way that the conferences were set up, and you know, the SEC and Big 12, and you know, it was a little bit hard to get used to some of those changes. I mean, when you have like Nebraska coming over to the Big Ten, and initially I wasn't sure how I would think about that, what I would, what I would see when those teams started playing their non-traditional rivals, and now these are big conference games and stuff like that. So I think it's worked out well, though. You know, as we've gone on, it's created some new rivalries. It's created some different matchups, some bigger games. So I think it's good for college football to continue to look at evolving, continue to look at how they can make the sport better, how they can make the competition better. I think just creating new ways to bring attention to the sport and kind of create some buzz as they continue to grow and grow the interest around the country. That being said, I'm not a huge fan of the Texas to the Big Ten connection. I'm just not sure how much sense that makes in my mind. I mean, obviously I think Texas has always had kind of that Southern feel, and not just in the state itself, but even in the football program. And so, you've already added in a lot of the mid-Atlantic when you're bringing in Rutgers and Maryland, and now you're kind of expanding into the South if you go in that direction. I do think Oklahoma is a little bit more natural. They do kind of feel like a mix between kind of that South, maybe Southwest kind of feel, and the Midwest. I could see that being a good fit, but then again, you're kind of breaking up that Oklahoma-Texas rivalry. So, I think it would be good for the Big Ten to always continue to look at their options, because I think the rest of the conferences are going to do the same. I think we are probably, maybe 10 years away from moving towards that super conferences where you're really taking away a lot of the Ohio State Bowling Green, Ohio State Toledo games, and you're going to have a lot more of just, those big matchups every week, because that's what sells and that's what fans want to see. But I think there is something to be said about, the way that it's set up now, and giving teams a little bit of a chance to kind of get into a groove early in the season before they play some of those big games. Obviously, Ohio State played at Oklahoma early last year, so you're already seeing some of that as well.
Yeah, I think if Texas, very well said, I think if Texas leaves the Big 12, which I think is inevitable, it seems like the Big 12 eventually is going to collapse. I think a natural fit for Texas is the SEC. You already have A&M in the SEC. As you said, Texas is more of that southern feel. Even though Texas is kind of its own deal, Lone Star State and all that, I get that. But like you said, it's still
they
more
may have their own
southern feel.
Texas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe they'll just be an independent. That actually went through my mind. I could see Texas being an independent. But going to conference, if they leave the Big 12 to join a conference, I think it will be the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a much more natural fit. I think that would really create some interesting rivalries. First of all, again, you'd reunite them with A&M, but you'd also create kind of the LSU-Texas natural rivalry that I think is there and would make a lot of sense. You'd have some of those big-time matchups with Florida and Tennessee and Alabama and, some of the more traditional. Not that you wouldn't have that in the Big Ten. You certainly would. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. You'd have a lot of that as well, but to me, I think that would be a better fit. Now, does that mean that's what's going to happen? Not necessarily. I think we've seen, if nothing else, that it doesn't always align with what, fans think would make the most sense. It's always driven by dollars, opportunity, where do they feel like they're the best fit. Obviously they've got that weird rivalry with A&M where it's like, we don't want them to think that we want to be a rival with A&M. So, they're okay with A&M being in the SEC and them not being in the SEC, because it's like, well, we don't really care about them as much as people think we do. So I think it would be cool to see if I think you're right about the Big 12. Eventually it just seems like it's, kind of being held up by a house of cards at times. So eventually I think you'll see a change, and I think it would be great to see, Texas kind of in the mix with some of those other schools that make natural sense. But nothing would shock me. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if Oklahoma and Texas ended up in the Big Ten, and someone else that would be a more natural fit like Notre Dame eventually, probably never, but eventually joined a conference and all of a sudden, they were in the SEC or something crazy like that. So it all just depends on, really we know it's driven by those dollars and the opportunity that the school sees.
Let's switch gears and talk some Buckeye football here, not conference expansion, but actual Buckeye football. Focusing on the running backs. Brandon, I'm kind of torn on Mike Weber. I mean, I reaching 1,000 yards as a redshirt freshman, that's a nice feather in his cap, and you can see him getting better. He's still just a young guy. But then part of me thinks, like, what's really his ceiling, though? Is he ever going to be better than, like, a Boom Herron? I certainly don't think he can get to the Carlos Hyde level. But then again, maybe I'm wrong, and he can be an outstanding back, a first-team All-Big Ten back. Who knows? Just what's your take on Mike Weber?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question because I think people are kind of going into the season with pretty low expectations for Mike Weber, for a guy who's coming off a 1,000-yard season, basically as a rookie, didn't play at all his freshman year and really wasn't even considered to play. Got himself in shape, came back, Zeke went to the NFL and he seizes that opportunity, runs for 1,000 yards as a redshirt freshman in the Big Ten. And I kind of feel like people are going into this season saying, well, let's hope he can, he can do something. Let's hope he can get a little bit better, or else I'm waiting for, Demario McCall or J.K. Dobbins to really step in and kind of take over, or at least start to take away some of his carries. I see that. I think the one thing that people had gotten used to with Zeke was the big explosive plays, getting to the second level, breaking through a linebacker and just going all the way to the house. We didn't see Mike Weber make those kind of runs last year, and I think that probably, coupled with the fact that you've had so many backs come in the last, 10, 15 years, and have big years early on. Maurice Clarett, Beanie Wells, obviously Zeke Elliott. You've got these guys who, 1,000 yards, they're at 1,000 yards by, week 9, so there's a lot of expectation for the Ohio State running back position. It's not just 1,000 yards. It's, can you get to 1,400 yards? Can you put up 11, 12, 13, 14 touchdowns? So I'm kind of the mentality, though, that this is the year for Mike Weber. Last year was really kind of get your feet wet. You're the running back. You still got a little bit of a dysfunctional offense that didn't really have any other options in terms of stretching the field, keeping safeties out of the box. Really nothing really went well the last 2 years offensively in terms of consistency. So to me, I think Mike Weber is primed to be a guy who could have a big year and really solidify that spot. I mean, looking at his numbers earlier, and if you get into some of his numbers, I mean, the guy just simply wasn't getting carries late in the year. So, I'm going back to, you go down the stretch, you had 14 against Northwestern, 11 against Nebraska, 12 Maryland, 14 Michigan State, 11 Michigan, and 5 against Clemson. That's really not a lot of opportunity to make big plays and kind of be that guy. If you go back to the end of Zeke's career, he's, 27, 26, 27, 30, 27. So I think it's tough to compare because Zeke was such a force and he just wore defenses down. Now, that being said, I don't think Mike Weber is going to be Zeke Elliott, but, I do think there's an opportunity if they're going to make him a 20 carry kind of guy, for him to kind of emerge. Now, he's got to get more explosive, but I'm on the bandwagon a little bit to see what he can do.
I like your confidence in him. I like that. What do you expect Demario McCall's role will be? And J.K. Dobbins as well, assuming J.K. Dobbins stays ahead of Antonio Williams, which I think he will be. You think those guys will be mixed in, just kind of change the pace? You think one of them might have a relatively big role? Just maybe give your thoughts on McCall and Dobbins, how you see them fitting in.
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure you're going to see McCall in the mix. I mean, that was something I felt strongly about going into spring. You knew you had Mike Weber, and you didn't know what else you had offensively other than, J.T. Barrett at the quarterback spot. I felt like Demario McCall was kind of the one other maybe unknown known. We had seen enough of him to kind of get an idea that he could play, and I think he will have a role. Now, what that's going to look like, I'm not sure. He could play some H-back. It looks like they want him to be more of a tailback, at least for now. So I absolutely think that he's going to get some carries. Again, going back to that explosiveness, I mean, Ohio State was 8th in the Big Ten last year in explosive offensive plays of 20 yards or 30 yards or more. So they've got to get more explosive. I don't know if Mike Weber, if that's where he's going to make up those extra yards. Is he going to start breaking some of those long runs? Maybe. But I think McCall may be one of those guys who can break off some big plays. He looks like he's very good at running in the open field once he gets to that second level. So I think the more opportunity he gets, the better he's going to be. And so maybe early in the season, it's kind of feeling out period. We're going to give some carries here and there. He may play some H, he may play some tailback. We'll figure it out. And then I think as the season goes on, again, kind of see him maybe picking up steam and kind of being used a little bit more like Curtis Samuel as time goes on, kind of figuring out, how do we do that balance. Again, a lot of the reason Mike Weber didn't get the ball as much late in the year last year is because they were giving the ball to Curtis Samuel. So I could see a similar scenario playing out if he's making some big runs and explosive plays. Mike Weber's going to have to do a little bit of that to kind of hold off and keep those carries away from McCall. I don't know that I see Dobbins getting in the mix yet, unless Weber struggles or there's an injury or something like that. I don't think that they'll rotate 3 backs early in the year, although I do think he'll stay ahead of Williams, and I do think he'll probably get some late opportunities to run the football and probably look pretty good. So I'm sure they'll be intrigued by him.
Great insights, as always, from Brandon Castel. Thank you very much, Brandon, and thank you to all the listeners out there for tuning in to the show. I appreciate it. Hope you have a great day and a great weekend. Let's hear some Buckeye swag. Best band in the land.